Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do a little bit of plein air painting. I live in a coastal community in Northern California, and we're known for our agriculture, particularly pumpkins, but over the years we've also been known for our floral ag, although I do believe that's lessening as there's been a closure of a number of greenhouse nurseries in the region. Nonetheless, there is this beautiful field with flowers that are growing right now that I wanted to capture before they were cut and sent to the florist. And I am on a highway. You probably can hear the loud noise, and so a lot of the video I will dub over later. But let me go ahead and just sort of video the area a little bit and show you what my intention is today as we get started, and thank you for joining me. All right, here's the field that I'm going to attempt to paint today. It's just an incredible floral growing area. I love the stripes of colors. Let's try to zoom in on this and see. You can just see the purples and lavenders and creamy pinks, the creamy yellows, and of course then the sunflowers over here, which many are going to seed already. And so I'm going to just add a few more in there just for the contrast and the beauty. I love the way from this vantage point the angle goes and is drawing us, perhaps it's drawing us off the painting. I don't know. I'm going to try to work out the composition a little bit more, figure out what I'm doing there. And as you can hear this incredible traffic noise, I'm going to not make you, as I said, endure this. So a lot of it you'll just watch the video dubbed over later. Now, this traffic is coming in from the San Mateo area and maybe beyond. This is the only east-west highway coming into town. And even though it's overcast and foggy, the tourists are coming in because on the other side of that hill, it is likely sunny and hot. It takes you into the Bay Area, the inland area of a northwest highway of San Francisco to San Jose, comes right down this peninsula. And so the tourists come in not only for the beautiful ocean experiences, but also just to escape the heat. It's a wonderful town in that regard, although as you can see, our highways get a bit packed and traffic gets difficult on the weekends. So here I am in this spot trying to, even though dealing with the traffic noise, I'm going to try to find my creative, quiet spot and just paint away. Okay, we're getting ready now to actually start the painting here, and I'm doing the voiceover so you don't have to listen to all the traffic noise. I've also doubled the speed of the video so that you don't have to watch the full hour plus that it took. Oh my, look at that bright yellow spot. Of course, I blended out. I'm painting the background wash right now. And as you know, if you do watercolor, the paints dry considerably lighter. But I'm getting in the basic color shapes, color feel, mood, temperature, all of that. Trying to, well, I'm doing the big wash draw there of the shape of the rows of flowers and the color feel, and misting it here so that it will, blend and splotch a little and just sort of recede into the background. As I'm going along here, I'm also adding a few darkers, accentuating the shape. Obviously, there's a lot of green between the rows of flowers, and so I'm trying to get that feel built into it. I have to admit to you that as I was painting this, I got lost in my head a number of times on how to figure out how to do this. So it was a bit challenging. Quickly, I realized that the background was entirely too light. I'm not painting a sky here because this is a valley and those are some hills that immediately jut up from the floor of the valley where the farming is taking place. Obviously, if I was to look up higher, we see the sky. But for this cropping down and trying to create the frame, I really wanted a tighter feel of the field. So I just have, a light green background with a little bit of reddish color in it, burnt umber or whatever it was, raw sienna, to try to get the hill to sort of recede. And of course, now you can see I'm splattering a bunch of the yellow spots for the sunflowers, and making them a little smaller to the left and bigger splotches on the right. You're going to see they're going to dry a little bit lighter as well. I'm not sure that was the best time to do it, and I in fact will add a little more intense yellow spots in a little while. So it just, I'm sure you've had the same sort of feeling, those of you that are newer and to painting as I am. You just sort of like, I don't know what to do next, and usually I start from top down, and the back can come forward. As you'll see, I was sort of all over the painting and trying to represent this as I went along. It was just, again, it was kind of a challenge. And I have to tell you that I really like the end result, but along the way I was sure that this was an absolute failure of a painting. I was sure that, in fact, at about this stage, I was thinking maybe I should just start over. And I just kept pressing through, and, and it worked out. So here I'm putting in the brighter part of the tree, and I'm going to go underneath it with some darker colors to create some form and shadowing under the bushes. It's not a bright sunny day, but clearly there is some shading underneath still, and the tops of the foliage do have some highlights, and so I'm trying to create that. I recognize from this angle and the camera, it's not picking up all the depth of color, and of course at the end I'll show you the painting straight on so that you can see this. And then I moved to, some of the other trees. This next tree had a little bit more of a bluish color in the green. And I always feel, and anybody that you watch that paints landscapes, greens, are not, you can just sort of really mess up with the greens and make them too flat. So I have a lot of variety of green in here. I often find that when I have done some of my earlier paintings, I tend to make my greens way too blue. I've started to realize that a lot of the trees really have a lot more browns and reds in them. And maybe it's just this area and the drought we're going through. But I just find that it's more natural feeling. There's a warmth to it as well. And so I've got, different shades of green coming on here. This tree is a little bit more blue-green as opposed to obviously the one to the right of it. I'm getting ready now to do some lighter trees around the sides that have kind of an olivey lavender feel, believe it or not. And how I mixed that was to take that green and actually add some lavender paint. And of course the lavender paint has a bit of a white in it, a little bit more opaque feel to it. And so on the final painting, it actually dried nicely with a little bit of a olivey, chalky feel to it, which helps it to be offset from some of the brighter trees. I ended up being real pleased with how that came out. You can see, I'm trying to create some unique shapes, some layering, again, some undertone color, some shadowing that's going to come in here. And And so I'm doing the whole fingernail trick to try to get some trunks and some motion in there. You know, I'm not always so successful with that. I feel like it scars the paper a little bit. Some artists are, you know, it's a skill, like all of this. You practice, you try it. Um, I felt like it created them to be a little too white. It got exposed a little too much of the paper, so I'm adding just a bit of a color in the channels that it created. Um, and you know, it came out okay. At this point now, I'm moving from the tree line, and I'm realizing right at the edge of the tree line in the back of the field, there just really is a lot of the flowers. You know, it's in a distance, you can't see any detail, and I'm trying to differentiate the edge of the woods coming into the floral area. And and of course, I don't want to make it to the left. It has more distance, and so I don't want it to be quite as bright and toned. And so I move a little bit more towards the greens here. All right, I totally remember at this point feeling very lost. How am I going to represent the flowers, creating the negative space, making sure the green leaves room for the blooms but doesn't look too dots well, you can see I'm just putting little splotch marks, and I really was starting to get concerned. Okay, I can't do the entire bottom 2/3 of this painting like this. How am I going to navigate this? I was just really at a loss for some ideas, and so I kind of gave up on that section for a moment, and then started realizing the flowers were much taller back there, and so I needed to get some vertical lines in here to create these stems. Also, you know, outdoors, trying to keep it wet so that not everything looked just too dry brush. Then I realized, oh, I need to stop doing the small fussy brush, and got into a bigger brush, trying to create some verticals. I forgot my my mop brush rather, and I'm using this wide flat. And I'm realizing I'm not disliking this, but I'm not really in love with what's going on here, and I just am still trying to create solutions on the fly. This is where, you know, I just am not that experienced that I feel like I knew exactly what I was doing. And how am I going to resolve this? How am I going to make this look the way I want? And here's where I had the aha, because I knew that it was too light color between all that, and so I needed to blend it out, and I used the squirt bottle, I think a watercolorist's favorite tool, and just sort of let things run a little bit, so there still was the hint of some vertical strokes being left, but it really was starting to create this mood of the wash and all the blending of colors as the field recedes. Now, that also meant that I lost some of the impact of my yellow splatter for the sunflowers. And yellow tends to have a bit of an opaqueness, at least the version I have. And so I'm splotching some of it down to bring back some of that. And I'm starting to feel like, okay, I'm going to get through this. I don't know. Leave in the comments below if you, in your painting, just have those crisis moments like, I don't know if this is going to come through. I certainly have those a lot, and was having it here. Now I'm starting to add some of the black, or not, it's not black, but the dark centers of the sunflowers. I'm using basically a mixture of some sepia, mostly sepia, but most of my puddles are pretty kind of blended in my tray, and I'm sorry that you can't see the actual palette. But I'm putting some sepia in there to bring some definition, and so that you can clearly see what they are. And again, I'm feeling a little bit better about this. Now I'm going to start to move a little bit further down and create some of the other color rows. And again, you're going to start to see that I just sort of bounce back and forth, left to right, top to bottom. I'm just sort of going all over the place. And again, I'm lost in the woods a bit, trying to figure out how to create the negative space around these flowers. I think that they're snapdragons, so they have these vertical floral patterns. And I want to make sure I leave some space for that so that the color will pop and not be lost. So it's just a challenge. And then I put the green in and realize, it just looks too dry brushy, and I do a lot of dry brush look. I do a lot of scumble look in my style, so I'm not opposed to that entirely. But I just knew that I needed to have it feel more soft and blended. Rather than being truly representational of these individual flowers, I really wanted to create the mood of these colors and the smell of this field. Not right now because the flowers are a little bit older, but when they're first blooming, as you drive by this field, it's just so rich with warm smells and sweet smells. And so I kind of wanted that feel of this softness, this perfuminess. I don't know if you can interpret a painting as the smell of it, and the perfuminess, but I didn't really want to, for my style, I didn't want to represent the individual stems of flowers that strongly. So I had to stop getting that real strong dry brush feel out of there. And so you can see here as I move to the left bottom corner, it's a lot more, washed and lost in there. And then I'm adding pops of brighter color. Again, I'm outdoors, so things dry a little bit quicker. Even though that was a wash going down there, I can still put some thicker pigment in and allow it to sit on top. And I'm going to add yet even more to that to bring some depth so that you've got layers of these colors. Because obviously the flowers are not just one stagnant color, that one-dimensional. So there's the lighter tones and, shades of the purplish pink and deeper purples that will start to emerge. And then even on this left corner of the green, there was a lot of yellow, wild, I don't think it's technically yellow mustard, but, we call that, So there's just some yellow over there that I want to splotch in. And again, I'm starting to lay this purple down and feeling like, oh no, and even as you look at it, as I'm rewatching this, as I'm, narrating, I'm just like, what was I thinking? And thankfully, the end result I feel very satisfied with. But along the way, I mean, that's the lesson of painting and watercolor in particular, as things move around with a mind of their own. And, it just sometimes you have to trust that it's going to happen, because along the way, you're just like, there is no way that this is going to look good. But I'm liking the colors. I'm liking the brilliance. I'm liking the rows that are being created here. I've got to try to make sure that there's still some creamy white flower row in there, which is a little more challenging because that really did have to be much more negative space painting. These brighter pigments I can lay on top a little bit more, but the creamier one was a bit more of a challenge there. And so I'm popping in some green here so that, it sort of darkens the rows where the green's underneath and allowing the color to emerge. And I'm doing that as we go along here. just a reminder, we're at double the speed. So, you know, when I watch these artists and they show these paintings at fast speed, I'm like, how did they get that done so fast? But, you know, I didn't. It's obviously slower than this. But I do also tend to paint fast. You can see my style is a bit rougher. I like to call it messy, but although messy sounds like a negative term, but I like the messiness of watercolor. I like the looseness, the abstracty. I like that feeling. So I don't mind that. Messy's not bad to me for the type of impressionistic sort of feel that I strive for. Doesn't mean I wish I wasn't a bit more representational sometimes, but you clearly know what this is. So it's not like it's not representational, but it's certainly anything but tight, right? So here is where the section of more white, creamy flowers are, and I am doing a little bit more negative and trying to leave some of that in there. And when you see the finished painting, you know, at a straight-on angle, you'll be able to tell that a little bit more. Drying out the brush, making sure that I don't do any backwashes here, popping in a bit more color again for another row of flowers. And again, I'm softening the bottoms up into it so you see the tops emerging, but there's just a loss of color down, or a wash of color going down into the depth of the row. And so that's my intention of what's going on here. So let's take a moment just as the painting continues to happen here and let you know that the paper I use is Saunders Waterford. High white, rough, 140 pound, and the paints I'm using are Daniel Smith. I also use Holbein, but this particular palette is all a Daniel Smith variety. And I use other papers, but I really have come to love the Saunders. It's got a softness, absorbency that I really like, just a beautiful quality to paint on. So it's become my favorite. All right, back to the painting itself. I'm realizing I need to fill in some of the lightness between the flowers with a bit more of a color. The wash was a little too light, particularly for being that depth as it goes back and to the right. I also want to darken it up so that your eye is drawn really towards that center pop of yellow directly under that big bluish tree. That's the darkest and the lightest side by side, so that's clearly drawing your eye a bit more. And so sort of the center of interest. This painting's a little difficult for me, the way I laid out the composition, to truly say what the center of interest is. But you are definitely, even though you're being pulled by the rows of the planting off to the left and off the screen, off the page, really the center column of that tall tree and that bright color back there, the yellow, it's drawing your eye in there. So I really think that that's where it was at. Now I'm also realizing that back hill really dried entirely too light, and it really just looked like a faded kind of greeny sky, which wasn't all that attractive. So I'm bringing in a little bit more greens and some definition that it's a hill that goes off to the side. So there's, a clear angle on it, and filling in some of the spaces in the trees so it doesn't look like, I just don't want your eye drawn so much up there. It was so bright that it was pulling the attention too much up into the back. And I wanted people to stay in the flowers. Can you just imagine yourself standing in that field of flowers, the smells and the beauty, and
maybe you're allergic and you're thinking, no, I'd be sneezing and there's too many bugs. But yeah, it just, that's where I want us to camp though. So I added some of that. Now I'm back down to the flowers. I told you I was all over the place. So I'm realizing I want some more definition, some brighter pops, some actual floral stems now. I've really laid down the structure, and now I'm starting to do a bit more of the detail look. And and for my painting to say detail, that's a stretch, isn't it? It's just lots of big blobs and brighter colors. But here I'm bringing some more intense color and popping it in there, trying to get the vertical stems again of the snapdragon feel. I'm using some deep purples, a mixture with the lavender sometimes, a little bit of ultramarine blue at times, and I bring in the quinacridone magenta, I think, is my reddish color there. And so I've just got various mixtures and blends of them and trying to get a bit more strength of a definition of a flower closer to the front. And then, of course, as it goes back. And here's where I had an aha. I'm like, how am I going to get these verticals? Well, I realized let's lay the brush down and just tap these verticals. I was trying to put the strokes in, from the side and didn't feel all that successful. So now you're going to see I'm just laying the brush flat and up with the various colors. And I was like, wow, I've never done that before. So this was a on the fly solution, learning and the power of the brush stroke and the way to use that tool. And so I'm just laying it on top there. And I feel like you clearly have these verticals. So you've got the strong angle pulling you to the left, but you've got all these verticals of the flowers reaching to the sky, that are taking you up into the center of the painting. And I was so pleased with myself that I figured out the way to accomplish that with the brushstroke. And so it's still very loose. It's very impressionistic, but it is very um, it's much more of a detailed feel up front, up closer. You can tell that that's what you're looking at, and I think it came out nice. Again, I was pleased with it. The brighter and more saturated colors are down towards the bottom, and to the bottom right there. And as you go back to the left, they become much more muted and grayed. I use a lot more lavender in there, and so you're not, the colors going back, but you're not really pulled along this bright saturated path. And I think that's important compositionally. So even though I'm still putting in some referencing to these verticals, I'm starting to use right there, in fact, some lavender paint, which is, softer, heathery feel as you go back into there. Now I'm using the same brush pattern, but getting some yellows and try to creamy, and again, then just move to the lavender. And realized I had it too strong of a brush stroke there. It really does need to be softened as you go further back. All right, we're nearing the end here. I'm putting in some final details, a telephone pole with some wires or electrical wires or telephone wires. I don't know what it is out here in the field. There were actually a number of poles around there, but in the area I was painting, just the one, and I felt that it was kind of an extra little element that was good to put in there. I always find it difficult to paint the wires, to paint the poles straight. And again, because I consider my style to be a bit messy, I just have to be comfortable with what I'm doing. I probably should have taken the painting and turned it over, and so it was sideways, rather rotated so that I could get a better angle on the wire, but I didn't. But it came out okay. As I stood back for a moment, which I realized that this top left corner was way too bright and drawing too much attention over there. And so I needed to soften, darken that side up so that you weren't pulled back and up there. It was just too much of a bright void up there. So I've, put a lightly shaded sort of a set of trees back there. In reality, there were such trees, but I had not put in the layers of trees. So this is, some very toned down eucalyptus trees, although looking at the painting, you can't tell what variety they are, obviously. But the idea is that it just toned down that bright top corner and made it a little soft. And now I'm signing it. So, hey, I hope if you made it this far in the video that you would like and subscribe. I would love for this to be shared. And here is the final painting as we look a little bit closer. And I hope you've enjoyed that. And now in context for the view that I had, just a reminder, what a beautiful thing. And if you'd like to support me, buy a coffee. There's a link in the description below where you can support me, by a few bucks here and there. Thank you for watching.